Hi, my name is Mary. Today I'm going to share with you my real story, one that I've never told anyone before, and by the end of the video you'll be shocked. Let's get started. My marriage to my husband Jake might look perfect from the outside, but in reality, it has big gaps. Jake is so focused on his work and his friends that he doesn't have much time or energy left for me. Over the years, this situation has pushed me into loneliness and disappointment. It was at a time like this that my neighbor Rick started becoming more involved in my life. Rick is 65 years old and a retired teacher. He's been living in this neighborhood since his youth and is loved by everyone. At first, we just had a friendly, neighborly relationship. We would help each other out with small things and have brief chats when we bumped into each other in the yard. But over time, these conversations started moving to more personal topics. Rick is the kind of guy who knows how to talk and makes you feel special when he listens. One night, Jake was away on another work trip, and I was sitting at home all alone. The air was cool, and the sky was pitch dark. Rick knocked on my door, saying he saw the lights in the yard. He had a homemade cake in his hand. "I noticed you were alone. Thought maybe we could have a cup of coffee together," he said. At first, I wanted to tell him I wanted to be left alone, but his smile and kind demeanor made me change my mind. I invited him in. We sat in my living room and started chatting over coffee. Rick talked about his past and his late wife. He spoke so sincerely and honestly that I began to feel closer to him. For the first time, someone seemed to really understand me. That night, we just talked. But there was a different warmth in Rick's eyes, and it both surprised and excited me. Rick and I talked for hours that night. As the conversation went on, I started to feel his interest in me. This feeling both bothered and strangely pleased me. It was a strange situation to receive attention from someone else, especially my neighbor, when I hadn't received any from my husband Jake for years. But I got caught up in the magic of the moment. It was late, and Rick was getting ready to leave. "Thank you for such a lovely evening, Mary," he said. His words, as he looked into my eyes, stirred something inside me. Without thinking, I said, "We should do this again sometime." He smiled and gently placed his hand on my shoulder, saying, "Whenever you want." The next day, I thought about what happened. I felt guilty, but at the same time, I was filled with a strange excitement. Every evening that Jake wasn't home, I found myself hoping Rick would somehow knock on my door, and he always did. He'd find an excuse related to the flowers in my yard or come by to continue our conversation from the other night. These visits quickly became a habit. One evening, Rick brought me old photo albums. As we looked at pictures of him with his late wife, I realized just how lonely he must have felt. "Rick," I said, "it's so clear how much you loved your wife, but it saddens me to see you feel this lonely." He took a deep breath and slowly moved closer to me. "Mary, I haven't felt this warmth from anyone in a long time," he said. His words made me uneasy, yet at the same time, my heart raced as if it was about to jump out of my chest. Before Rick left that night, he held my hand, and that gesture took us to another level. We locked eyes. "Mary, this feels wrong, but I know I understand you," he said. He must have noticed the loneliness in my eyes. At that moment, we both knew we were on the edge of a line, but neither of us could resist the magic of the moment. As Rick was heading for the door to leave, he paused for a moment. He turned and looked into my eyes. "Mary, I don't want to end this night," he said, his voice slightly trembling. I paused, too. My heart was racing, and I didn't know what to say. But there was a voice inside me telling me I should stop him. "Then stay a little longer," I said, the words slipping out almost instinctively. Rick didn't hesitate and came back, and we moved to the living room again. It felt like there was an invisible connection between us. We had moved a little closer from where we were sitting. When we locked eyes, the silence became more meaningful than our words. What I was feeling in that moment was hard to define. Rick gently placed his hand on mine and said, "Mary, this feels wrong, but at the same time, it feels so right." I stopped hiding my feelings. "Rick, this isn't entirely wrong or right, but this moment, it's tempting," I said. My eyes were fixed on his. In that instant, all the loneliness and desires inside me took over. I noticed Rick leaning toward me, and suddenly our lips met. The kiss was filled with excitement I hadn't felt in years. It was as if all my emotions found meaning in that moment. Rick gently pulled me into his arms, and we both completely surrendered to the flow of the moment. Every movement he made me feel that this moment was special. He was careful, gentle, and I felt completely safe by his side. Rick gently caressed my hair and pulled me closer. Every movement was thoughtful and respectful. I felt a part of the emptiness inside me begin to fill. What we shared that night wasn't just physical, it was also a sign of an emotional connection. His attention was the kind I had been waiting for but hadn't received from Jake in years. That night we both lost control, but everything happened carefully, attentively, and full of emotion. Rick made me feel special with every movement. This experience brought back a happiness I hadn't felt in a long time. Rick's touch was gentle and delicate. When his hand lightly rested on my cheek, I felt a wave of warmth inside me. The imprint of his fingers on my skin seemed to remind me of a feeling, a passion I'd long forgotten. As our eyes locked, the boundaries between us completely disappeared. In that moment, Rick gently pulled me towards him. His arms were strong, yet carried a sense of subtle protection. As I rested my head on his shoulder, I could hear the rhythm of his heart. It was a sign of trust and closeness for both of us. He slowly ran his fingers through my hair, and that gesture seemed to take away all the hurt I'd felt in the past. Rick's touch felt like a discovery. As his fingers slowly moved from my back to my waist, each motion carried meaning and care. There was no rush, just thoughtfulness and connection. When his breath brushed my skin, I felt my excitement grow even stronger. His approach was so gentle it was beyond words. When his lips lightly touched my neck, I felt a warmth inside me I hadn't known in years. With every movement, Rick was creating a bond not just physically but also emotionally. It wasn't just a closeness, but a moment where we both got lost in each other's depths. At that moment, every boundary and obstacle between us vanished. I completely surrendered to Rick's embrace. His warmth wrapped around me, not only my body but my soul as well. With each touch, I could feel that he was trying to understand me and value me. This experience wasn't just physical closeness, but the reconnection of a bond I hadn't felt in years. That night, what I felt in Rick's arms was completely different. I experienced a thrill and happiness I hadn't felt in years with my husband Jake. I wasn't questioning whether what was happening with Rick was right. All I knew was how good it felt. There was guilt inside me, yes, but these feelings were so strong that they overwhelmed the guilt. "This was truly a special night, Mary," Rick said, looking into my eyes. "Spending time with you like this, I can't even describe it." "I feel the same way, Rick. What we've shared, it was more beautiful than I could ever imagine," I said. I couldn't hide the excitement in my voice. What I experienced with him seemed to fill a void I hadn't even known existed. Rick said it was getting late and he had to leave. I walked him to the door. Before he left, he hugged me again, this time tighter and longer. "I can't wait to see you again," he said. And in that moment, I saw both happiness and hesitation in his eyes. When I closed the door and was left alone, I couldn't help but smile. After Rick left, I went back to the living room and sat on the couch. My mind was a mess, but I felt a deep sense of satisfaction inside. The fact that I had cheated on Jake should have bothered me, but instead, it had given me a new energy for life. What I shared with Rick had unlocked a passion and excitement I hadn't felt in years. The next day, when Jake came home from work, I acted like nothing had happened. But I could feel something had shifted inside me. I was eager to relive the connection I had with Rick. As days went by, I noticed that Rick's interest in me was growing. We started texting not just at night, but during the day as well. One morning, I received a message from Rick that caught my attention. "Mary, I need to see you again. I can't stop thinking about you since yesterday." My heart started racing as I read the message. This new excitement made me completely forget about Jake's absence. But at the same time, I wondered where this secret relationship would lead. I decided to make plans for my next meeting with Rick, but this time things felt a bit different. The thought that Jake might suspect something made me uneasy. On one hand, this relationship was adding color to my life, but on the other hand, it felt like things were getting out of control. A week later, Rick called again to meet me. This time, I was eagerly looking forward to it. The secret relationship developing between us was becoming more thrilling with each passing day. The day Rick arrived, I was home alone. I knew Jake would be coming home late from work, so I thought I could relax and enjoy the time with Rick. When he knocked on my door, my heart started pounding. I opened the door, invited him in, and we embraced immediately. For a few hours, we focused only on each other. The bond between us grew stronger with every passing minute. We talked, laughed, and enjoyed the moment. A voice inside me wished this moment could last forever, but I also knew that this relationship couldn't stay hidden for long. Then, I heard the sound of a car approaching outside. When I paid attention, I realized it was Jake's car parking. Panic set in. "Rick, you need to leave now," I said, rushing to the door. Rick, trying to stay calm, said, "Okay, no problem." He immediately decided to leave through the back window. As Jake entered the house, Rick quietly slipped out the door and headed for the backyard. As soon as Jake came inside, I quickly locked the door. Just a few seconds later, Jake knocked on the door and said, "Mary, open the door." I thought to myself, "Come on, don't rush." But when I heard the noise outside, I realized Rick had left quickly. Jake continued knocking on the door. I called from the kitchen, "Wait a minute, I'm inside." I hurried to my room, trying to hide the fear on my face as Jake knocked again. I quickly took a few steps and raised my voice a little more calmly than usual, saying, "I'll open it in a minute, just a few seconds." Without realizing what was happening, Jake waited outside while I secretly ended my meeting with Rick. When Jake came into the house, everything seemed to return to normal, but the turmoil inside me was so overwhelming that I slowly opened the door and looked at him with a calm smile. Jake entered a bit nervously and immediately looked at me asking, "Is everything okay?" "Yes, everything's fine," I said, trying not to feel the tension in his voice. We sat down slowly in the kitchen and started chatting, but I still felt the excitement of that secret moment with Rick inside me. After Rick left, I spent a few days claiming that nothing had changed in my life, but inside me there was a mix of guilt on one side and passion stirred by the newly discovered excitement on the other. Even when I was with Jake, I couldn't forget the mysterious and captivating moments I shared with Rick. Those moments had changed me in every way. I wanted to show Jake that everything was normal without shaking his trust in me. But on the other hand, I couldn't wait to relive the secret relationship with Rick. This dual feeling inside me kept growing day by day. Keeping it a secret would be difficult, but no matter what, I wasn't ready to cut ties with Rick. As the days passed, I saw that Jake suspected nothing, but I was still chasing the moments and excitement I'd shared with Rick. Even though everything seemed fine, the emptiness in my heart was craving something new. The doors to a secret world had opened, and I wasn't ready to leave that world behind. I'll end the story here, but if you want to know more about the exciting and special moments, please subscribe to the channel. For those who want the continuation of the story, leave a comment below.